We are starting a new session, and this session is Watershed Planning at Multiple Scales. My name is Susan Bristol. I'm the Municipal Policy Specialist at the Watershed Institute, and we have an incredible group of panelists today. And I would like to, I will introduce them as I run through the slides a little bit. There's a bit of housekeeping, but at the end, we really would love your feedback, your questions, and your comments. So we're going to try to leave some room for that and honor those who are online as well as those in the room. So thanks for being here. We need to thank our sponsors, and we appreciate them supporting our work and this day and for bringing us all together. You all know to silence your devices. If you're online, please use the Q&A to ask your questions. And this program is being recorded and will be available in the Zoom hub going forward. There are credits for this session. All of us here are professional planners, and if you happen to be a planner and you're trying to do certification maintenance for your AICP status, you can sign your name on the paper in the back of the room before you exit the room, and you'll get 1.25 credits for this session. And just a reminder of the theme and why we put this session together. Watershed planning, as you've heard all day, is a regional concern. And in the world of planning, it is referred to as possibly a multi-jurisdictional area of planning practice. And it's becoming more and more important, not only because of climate change, but ever increasing development pressures. Our speakers include Donna Rendiero from the New Jersey Office of Planning Advocacy, Thomas D'Alessio from the Musconetcong Watershed Association, Carlos Rodriguez, who runs an urban design and planning practice, and he is a fellow in the AICP, right? So that's admirable. Thank you. Angela. Oh, okay. Oh, congratulations. Revealed here in your hearing. That's great. And Angela Knowles, PP, AICP. And Angela, we're all doing this. Angela has a degree from Keene College in New Hampshire and a master's of urban and environmental planning from the University of Virginia, my alma mater. So we're both wahoos. She is working consulting with the New Jersey State Plan, and most recently worked with the Somerset County Office of Planning, Policy, and Economic Development. And Carlos is an urban designer, professional planner, writer, and educator. He is an architect, which is also my background, and a planner, getting his degree at Rutgers. And he has taught, been in academia and taught, and his planning practice represents planning clients at a variety of scales, federal, state, county, and local. Donna is the executive director and secretary of the State Planning Commission, and executive director of the Office of Planning Advocacy, which is within New Jersey's Department of State. Previously, she was chief of administration for the Housing Mortgage Finance Agency, as well as chief of staff. And Thomas D'Alessio has over 3 decades of experience in public policy and land use planning. He also teaches, I'm happy to say that we were colleagues together at New Jersey Institute of Technology and often supported each other's teaching work, crossing the boundary between architecture and planning. At the Musconetcong Watershed Association, he leads a staff that is dedicated to improving the quality of that watershed. Let me proceed here with some intro slides. Just a reminder that the watershed mission is keeping water safe, clean, and healthy And we do that with 4 teams: conservation, advocacy, science, and education. I'm on the advocacy team and work in municipal policy, but we also work at the state level. And it's important to remind everyone that what we learn locally from our towns influences our advocacy at the state and vice versa. A watershed is actually an area of land. It's not just the waterway. It drains into a particular body of water. And because this session is about scale, multiple scales, I'd like to remind us that watersheds are nested like the Russian dolls in that image. And on the right is a kind of cartoon, but it's a pretty good diagram of a watershed. Now I'm throwing in some art because we have an interesting example here. New Jersey artists, the one on the left is at the Barnes in Philly, and the one on the right is at the Clark Museum, very esteemed institutions. On the left, a no-name artist in the 19th century has a domestic scale relationship with her watershed. She's got the headwaters illustrated. It's a cutout. It's a 2-dimensional cutout. She's got the wildlife down in the wetland, and a home and a family and a waterfall and the stream or the river. And this is inspired by Cassville, which is actually a part of Jackson Township right now. And on the right, we have this spiritual representation of the landscape, the vast landscape, the water in the foreground. George Innes is from Montclair. So that was his vision of the New Jersey watershed. Now, watershed planning offers numerous regional scale opportunities, as we've heard already today. I'm showing the Assunpink Creek watershed, which comes down to the left there in Trenton, where it has an outfall on the Delaware River. It's a fairly large region. And the insert on the bottom is part of Trenton's redevelopment plan, showing the waterfront redevelopment zone on the Delaware River, which includes the Assunpink at its final moments before it outfalls into the Delaware. So it's very important that I work with upstream and downstream communities, and that they recognize each other and understand the impacts. Interjurisdictional planning includes multiple counties and municipalities. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have a sign on the road and you're reminded of the watershed that you're entering. And on the right, actually some architecture students did some mapping showing North Jersey watershed, the county, and then the location of the actual project site in relation to those entities and in relation to the Pompton Upper Passaic watershed. Infrastructure planning for natural systems isn't something we really do. We think of traffic and roadways, but watersheds deserve the same attention and energy as man-made infrastructure. And you can see here, historically, we have the railroads, we have the canals, we even have a canal boat transported over land to get to the water. But unfortunately, on the bottom right, that's Pequannock, near my hometown. The streets meant for traffic and transportation have actually and frequently become flooded waterways or canals. So here, just a quick look again at the map of New Jersey, the Millstone Watershed Management Area 10. And on the right, you see that the Millstone River watershed connects communities that are pretty far apart. They're 45 or more miles away. And the folks up in Millstone are at the headwaters, but ultimately Manville is where the Millstone meets the Raritan. So this is clearly a regional planning situation here. And if we look at the county on the left, Somerset County, and the big red circle is where the river confluence is between the Millstone and the Raritan, that's Manville. And then you look at a blow up of Manville, a mapping that we did in-house showing the effects of the expanded floodplain after the inland flood protection rule. Again, the big red circle around the confluence. So maybe river confluences are an obvious thing to be looking at because that's where a lot of the Blue Acre buyouts are happening. So finally, what we see on the left is all too familiar. That's the shopping mall in on the Pompton River in Passaic. You can see that they did their own removal of impervious material because of all the damage. But that's what we're seeing a lot of. But we need to think about the future. And on the right is a student project which converted that strip mall, which flooded 3 times in 5 years, disrupting lives, jobs, businesses, and health and safety, and converted it to an image on the right with green infrastructure and restoration of floodplain. So I just wanted to leave us and launch us into the panelists with this idea of we must use our imaginations in thinking about the future. And we need to get beyond the all too frequent, situation that we experience now with flooding and pollution. So with that, I'll invite Donna to come up and talk about the state plan.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Donna Randiero. I am the Executive Director of the Office of State Planning. I like to call us, our legal name is the Office of Planning Advocacy, but nobody knows what that means. So we're the Office of State Planning. We are within the Business Action Center within the Department of State. So on behalf of our Lieutenant Governor, I want to say thank you for listening to us. And what's interesting is people many times don't understand why a planning office is within the business advocacy office. And part of the reason we're in the shape that we're in is because we need to be able to locate our development and our redevelopment and our business opportunities where it makes sense from a land use perspective. And we have found a lot of coordination with our business advocate coworkers to foster that understanding between each other, because oftentimes there's economic development and there is the environmental concerns, and they don't always talk to each other. And that's why we have some of the issues we have. So this works out really, really well. We have offices that include our office as well as business and export promotion, but we talk to each other, and hopefully that's the beginning of the conversations. But we're here to talk about the state plan. So what is the state plan? The State Planning Act was enacted as part of the sister legislation to the Mount Laurel legislation. The theory behind that is you can't provide good affordable housing planning unless you do comprehensive land use planning. So that created the State Planning Act and the State Planning Commission. And one of the requirements within that act is that the State Planning Commission develop a state plan that will be designed to represent a balance of development and conservation objectives. And that word balance is very, very important, because I speak to a number of different groups, and depending on who I'm talking to, it's sometimes a very different conversation. So our challenge is to make sure we allow and enable economic growth without interfering and with making our environmental circumstances better. So that language is directly from the State Planning Act. But the state plan is not regulatory. I'm not DEP, I'm not DOT. I can't go and require municipalities to participate in the plan. It's guidance. It provides technical assistance to municipalities that want that assistance. So I put municipalities in one of 3 categories. The municipalities and the counties that want to do the right thing for the sake of doing good planning, those folks don't need our help. Then you have a handful of municipalities that want to stay so far away from good land use planning, I'm not even going to waste my time with them. But the vast majority of municipalities want to do the right thing. They just need help in how to do it. Technical assistance, provide guidance. How do you do it? They have limited resources. So we're here to help them do that. The goals of the 2001 plan, and which is the plan that we're updating now, you could see that balance. We are looking to revitalize cities and states, conserve natural resources, providing beneficial economic growth. I'm not going to read them all, but things like adequate housing at a reasonable cost, sound and integrated planning. That's where that comprehensive planning comes in. And that's sometimes where our challenge comes in, because we need to do it all, and it's hard to do it all at the same time. So we're proposing goals in the 2024 plans that are very, very similar, but we're adding 2 more goals. We're adding climate change, because while the plan talked about climate change, it didn't talk about it to the level of a goal. We also are adding a second goal to address environmental justice and equity. In my mind, environmental justice is just one spoke of the equity umbrella. But we think both of those items that were discussed in the 2001 plan should be elevated at this point to additional goals. We also want to add stewardship to our goals, because that wasn't discussed as much. Great, you have all of the natural resources, but how do you make sure we maintain those resources? And then we want to expand the idea of appropriate housing to include, there's affordable housing and then there's market rate housing, but there's a vast group of housing options that are all in between. It's not one size fits all. And then we want to talk about revitalizing and recentering underutilized urbanized areas, things like abandoned office parks, those types of things. That really the focus of this year, this plan is redevelopment, so that we don't have to go into greenfields, but that also includes things like abandoned office parks and the like. So there are regional planning opportunities. We have not, as a state, done a good job in working with our neighbors, whether they're municipal, whether they're counties. We're a home rule state. Somebody said to me, "Oh, you're trying to do a state plan in a home rule state? Good luck with that." And because many of our mayors and many of our elected officials want to deal only with what's within the boundaries of their municipalities, and they don't want to consider how that impacts their neighboring municipalities. And we all know water doesn't respect municipal boundaries. So how do we get that? And I get there should be some locally driven decisions. Zoning should be included in that, but even with those locally driven decisions, that we need to consider our neighbors. I call it the good neighbor policy. You don't want to be subjected to a negative impact from a neighboring municipality, so you shouldn't be also impacting another neighbor's municipalities. But one of the focuses that we want to talk about in the new state plan is regional planning in some aspects. And there are things like major transportation arteries, resiliency measures, and that's what this whole conference is about on a watershed basis, and vulnerability assessments to address flooding and the like. So there is a need for regional cooperation, whether that's at the county level, whether it's at the watershed level, but we have not historically done a good job of that. So we're going to try to make that better in this plan. I'm just going to really quickly go through the update process. This is probably about a 20-minute presentation that I have to do in 10. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. We will have 4 concurrent paths that will give us 4 end products. We have a plan document that is basically the words around it. We have to do an infrastructure needs assessment and an impact assessment that basically addresses what the infrastructure needs are going to be both today and in the future for the timeline of the plan, which is 2050. The impact assessment basically says what would we do without a plan? And while we don't have all of that information yet, what we're seeing in the initial data is that it does make a difference. Most of the building permits occur where the state plan recommends growth, and most of the conservation is where the state plan recommends conservation. It's not 100% and it's not perfect, but it works really well. And the other key is stakeholder engagement is critical. First half of this year, the second half of last year, I probably spoke to over 1,100 people. We had a number of webinars. Once we issue the preliminary plan, I have to do 21 public hearings in 45 days. So that's going to be fun. Plan document, the preliminary plan, we're hoping to get approved by April. It's the subject for cross acceptance. We hear from municipalities. It's coordination of municipal, county, and state land use plans. And as a result of that process of cross acceptance, we will develop a draft final plan. And hopefully by the end of this year, we will be able to present to the commission for approval, the draft final plan. Talked about the infrastructure needs, which a lot of infrastructure that we will include in it. Environmental, energy, and transportation in phase 1 is well underway. And you can see phase 2 has an awful lot of different infrastructure pieces that we're going to be talking about. Impact assessment is just what I talked about last year. I'm happy to say that my 3 co-panelists are all on our consultant team for different reasons. We have NJAPA with Carlos doing the primary writing, as well as with Tom. And Angela is also our outreach person to help us promote the public input and stakeholder input. First half of the year, we're in the middle of that. We're doing the public hearings, the cross acceptance. Second half of the year, we're hoping to complete all of the pieces. We have to have 6 more public hearings after we go through the cross acceptance process and hopefully adopt it by the end of the year. That's a very, very, very aggressive timeline, and I'm usually laughed out of the room. But you got to give it a shot, got to try. Implementation, but that's the key, is the implementation. A plan is only as good as its implementation. Critical to the success of the plan is working not only with our state agency partners, but with our municipality and our county partners as well. Some of these statistics are really for housing, but I think they inform the discussion on watershed management. These statistics basically say that household size is getting smaller. We know that. In fact, housing sizes would have gone down if it wasn't for the fact that New Jersey is ranked #1 in the country in terms of people aged 18 to 34 that are still living with their parents. 45% of New Jersey's population between 18 and 34 are still living with their parents. Goes to the affordability issue. People can't afford to live on their own. And because historically municipalities are afraid of housing, they zone for general warehouse or general manufacturing. And so the message here is that we should, first of all, why are we afraid of children? Don't children make communities more enjoyable, more not only diverse, but vibrant? We shouldn't be afraid of children. There are 2 examples here of 151 apartments resulting in 24 school-age kids. 240 apartments resulted in 7 school-age kids. That's a message that we need to get to our planning boards today to say, don't be afraid of residential, don't be afraid of schoolhouse children, because frankly, because they don't want housing, they put manufacturing, and that creates watershed management even more and more difficult. And just I threw in their median household income in New Jersey is $85,000. That gives you a monthly budget of $6,300. Try to take your taxes out of there, your housing out of that, your childcare out of that, your transportation, and see if that's easy to live on. So that's in New Jersey. We talked about outreach. I don't have to go into a lot of that. We have the information on where you can provide comments. And some implementation challenges really quickly. We have to look at the balance of development and conservation. State agencies are, the statute envisions the state agencies to implement the state plan through functional plans, investment priorities, and administrative roles. We've done an okay job of it, but not a great job, and that's got to get better. But that's because we have competing statutory requirements. We, as regulators, DEP has to comply parcel by parcel. We as planners have to look at it at the 30,000 foot level. And sometimes that's hard to reconcile. one of the key things about a state plan policy map that we have as part of the state plan is planning areas. Planning areas 1 and 2 are the areas that we encourage for growth. Planning areas 4 and 5 are rural and environmentally sensitive. 3 is kind of an in-between. We call it a fringe planning area. But the thing to recognize here is that not all planning areas are exclusively for that definition. So a 1 and a 2, a 1 might be in Newark. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be green space in a planning area 1. Planning areas 4 and 5, we need to ensure that we have some economic opportunity for those areas, even though they're environmentally sensitive. And that's the challenge that we have. Food for thought. I'm not going to go through these, but a lot of these are the questions that we are trying to go through and figure out what's different. Our landscape has changed immensely since 2001. So these are just some questions that we're kind of grappling with now as we're trying to finalize a preliminary plan. That's it. Wow. So I did it. Did I do it? Yes. Did I do it? That's a 20-minute presentation normally, but I got through it.
Thank you. So let's get Tom D'Alessio up here and see if his slide is in fact the next one. Yes, indeed. You're out of your way.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, the Watershed Institute. This has been a fabulous conference, really, really tremendous, from Dan Van Abs all the way through to the session. Being on this panel with old friends is really amazing and a great opportunity. But I also need to recognize that I have 2 board members and 2 staff in the audience. So my 2 vice presidents, Bill Levins and Mary Pace Goldman, and my staff people, Krista Reeves, our water quality program manager, and Stephanie McMorrin, our watershed resilience planner. When I present this, I won't use the word I, because it's a team effort, and we really need to make sure that we celebrate success that Dan Van Abs talked about earlier today. So I'll provide just some examples of what we're doing here. We have a number of planning opportunities engaged in the process. The board last year approved a new strategic plan that provided a mission and a vision statement, and then 4 key goals: planning, education, advocacy, and stewardship. And all of our strategies and tactics flow from that. In our planning in particular, we are engaged in a 319 watershed management plan for the middle section of the Musconetcong, but we're also recognizing that we don't have an overall vision plan for the entire watershed. As we heard this morning, we don't really have any watershed in New Jersey that has a comprehensive, up-to-date watershed plan. So we are moving towards that. And the first thought is that through the 319 plan, we'll actually engage our community, make sure we can think about what are the challenges and where there are opportunities through very specific recommendations. Our vision plan will ensure whether you're at the Lake Hopatcong head of our watershed, the headwaters, or all the way down to Regalsville and the lower area of our watershed, we all have a common understanding. What are we trying to do? What are our key goals? And then what are the metrics? That will then flow to an action plan where we actually have specific strategies and tactics. And then from that, we'll put together a restoration and protection plan with concepts and actual implementation projects to show that it can work. And this is a map that shows our watershed all the way from Lake Hopatcong all the way down to the Delaware River. And we do it because we have over 4 miles of wild and scenic designation. So in New Jersey, that's fairly rare. And on the East Coast, it's actually fairly rare. It's an amazing opportunity for you to see a portion of New Jersey that most people will not recognize as New Jersey. It's an opportunity to recognize that we have natural resources that have an economic value, that have a social value, that have an environmental value, and we need to protect all of those. And for better or worse, none of those values respect political boundaries. And can you blame them? So this is our strategic plan. It falls into the 4 categories, and I'll just provide some examples of why we think watershed planning is critically important and why watershed associations are the prime opportunity to make these work. Everything from our 319 planning process that we're going through, working with Montclair University, and again, Krista and her team doing a fabulous job identifying the hot spots. We've been doing data analysis for 3 decades now. And the basic punchline is that In the initial decade or so, we were finding that much of the contamination in our Category 1 river and various portions of our watershed came from agricultural results going through. So through best management practices and other techniques, we found that that's actually subsided, that most recently the hotspots are really being caused by human activity. So it's failing septics. It's a lot of the challenges that we have of not really treating Mother Earth with the respect it deserves. We're also doing work in the field and doing various plantings that we heard. We think of the water in particular and the inhabitants of the water as our critical resource. The trout, because we are a Category 1 river, trout maintenance, trout production, they're literally the canary in the coal mine. So when the trout are happy, the water's cold, the water's clean. That's a simple message we can tell everyone, right? And need to recognize that. And the point that we heard this morning about how best way to kill a river is to get rid of all of the plantings next to the riverbed because the water will get hot. People can understand that. That can help us encourage people to be more involved, to have a personal investment in our watershed. So we do various things such as identifying opportunities. And as we go through, we actually even identified a new opportunity for a Category 1 identification. And that's pretty important because if it wasn't for our citizen scientists and for our activists going through, we don't have enough government to handle all of these opportunities going out there. We encourage you all to become citizen scientists and be engaged in watershed protection. We have a River Watchers program. We have a Salt Monitor program. Get involved in your watershed and do these types of things. This is actually our watershed. We started looking in particular at what's the septic risk as we're going through. We started hearing from several homeowners throughout the area, in particular, senior citizens and people that are limited incomes. In order to sell a home in New Jersey, if you're on a septic system, you have to make sure that it can pass inspection. If it doesn't, you cannot sell that house. In some cases, that's a $40,000 to $80,000 bill before you even get to sell the house. If you're on a limited income or you're a senior citizen, that can be prohibitive. And then think about the impacts for everyone else that have private wells that are drinking the water that's coming through the system. So our challenges are building this consensus. How do we work with 4 counties and 26 municipalities, especially in an entity with no regulatory authority? Well, those of us who understand and believe in planning know that we can appeal to higher angels and basically say to folks, there are ways to get this stuff done. We don't necessarily have to rely upon government regulation as the stick to go through, that there are a lot of carrots that we can actually use and encourage people to use their opportunities. Watershed associations are respected brokers. We are the people in your communities. We know what the issues are, and we work with you to make them more effective. We can bring resources to the table, and MWA will have the first watershed vision plan in New Jersey this summer. So among the various programs that we do is we actually have engaged in creating opportunities. And this past year, we knocked down a building and created a brand new park. There are very few nonprofit organizations that actually own a park. We do. This will now allow you to walk from the county road all the way down into the Musconetcong River. That's an important thing. People can touch it, they can feel it, they can own it. And the more we can get people to own our rivers and to own our watersheds, the better off we'll be. We've done various plantings and trail work and cleanups. This quote is, in my mind, the most impactful thing I've ever heard. We actually have a committee woman in Franklin Township who said, MWA gets things done. I can't think of a more important compliment. And so I will then turn over the stage to Carlos Rodriguez, who will talk more about some of his experiences. And again, I've known Carlos for over 3 decades and can't think of a more important person to provide his perspective. Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome. Thank you. And greetings, everybody. So I'm a physical planner, and I'm used to planning at a variety of scales, from site to the region to the state. The planning techniques and approaches that you use will necessarily vary, and what works at the site level is not likely to work at a larger scale. So you have to make adjustments. And the watershed is certainly possible territorial scale for planning. Not for all types of planning, clearly, but for some types. I'm told that some time ago, New Zealand instituted the watershed as the appropriate unit for sub-regional planning. Now, this could be apocryphal. I haven't researched it, but I wouldn't put it past the Kiwis. They are rather eccentric. But whether or not they do it in New Zealand, I have to say, I'm skeptical that we will ever see proactive planning at the watershed level in New Jersey. And why do I say this? Because we have 21 counties and whatever, 565, 64, can't keep track, municipalities. Each county and municipality has a set of political boundaries that have nothing to do with watersheds. I don't even know where these political boundaries originated. I know we had an East Jersey and a West Jersey in colonial times, and now we have a North Jersey and a South Jersey. And as of some months ago, as of some months ago, a Central Jersey, which the governor attested as a real thing. But none of this has anything to do with watershed boundaries. Now, we heard a lot about programs that might incentivize municipalities to work together on watershed planning initiatives. I'm skeptical. Municipal planning is driven by various considerations, such as the pursuit of ratables, that's probably number one, or the avoidance of affordable housing. That might also be number one. Could be number two, I don't know. One thing I've never seen as a consideration in municipal planning is the interest of the watershed. And asking municipalities to do any planning that is based on watersheds or sub-watersheds is a likely non-starter. Understand, this planning would have to be connected to other aspects of planning that towns do, land use planning. Now, municipalities don't engage in supra-municipal planning with their neighbors on land use, on transportation, on housing, or on any other topic. And we know that none of these components of the planning function are confined territorially to one jurisdiction. So why would they make an exception for watershed planning? That's what had me scratching my head. Now, the state could and probably should encourage local governments to pay closer attention to watershed planning as part of their routine planning functions, i.e., as part of their master planning efforts. But it hasn't, at least not to date. And we'll see whether it ever will. So we appear to be stuck, in my opinion, at least for now, with a completely dysfunctional system that relies on site-specific assessments of the anticipated stormwater impacts, stormwater and others, of proposed land development projects, and never looks at the bigger picture. I can tell you with absolute certainty that the lengthy stormwater calculations that are submitted as part of land development applications are never questioned by board members, and frequently are not questioned by the board's professionals either. It is frequently left up to concerned neighbors and their professional representatives to question these calculations, which frequently are not credible. And as it turns out, it's an increasingly popular way to kill development projects, bad development projects, or at least to impose substantial redesigns. Now, the prevalent engineering approach to the handling of stormwater implications of a proposed land development project is to consider it a problem. It's to consider it a problem that needs to be solved, not to consider it an opportunity to solve problems that already exist. And this has also been the approach that's been taken on the regulatory front. Now, I can imagine a system that incentivizes intelligent approaches to stormwater. For example, by granting increased development potential on a site. But that is not in exchange for, but that is not the system we have in place today. Nobody is going to grant a density bonus for a land development project that proposes to recreate a degraded wetland, for example, or to remove invasives, or to daylight a stream that currently runs in a culvert. You want to do that? That's great. But you know what? You're getting nothing more than what you're already entitled to. Why not? It seems to me that we should be rewarding this kind of enlightened behavior from land development applicants that leaves each site a better place after it's been developed, Now, the idea that nature will heal itself if only we leave it alone is not wildly popular these days. It's rooted in a 19th century view of nature as the opposite of humankind, as two irreconcilable entities that are forced into an awkward coexistence on planet Earth, and that would perhaps be better off without each other. But the reality is we live in nature. There's a whole theory of city planning from the 19th century that recognizes this. It's called the Garden City movement. There are multiple expressions of this in the planning discipline: sustainable development, biophilic development, regenerative design, et cetera, et cetera. The ultimate expression of success in the execution of a planning project these days is to undo the mistakes of the past and to improve a site's ecosystem performance as much as we possibly can, not contain the damage, but actually fix the problems that already exist. We don't want to beat nature into submission.
Did you want me to move slides while you're talking?
No, we're
you're
getting there. We don't want to beat nature into submission like the European colonists, so much as to partner with nature on an equal footing. So we talk a lot about the advantages of the redevelopment of brownfields, gray fields, previously urbanized lands. And we heard this morning that the so-called redevelopment loophole will be closed in the near future. That's great. But let's remember that New Jersey has been intensely colonized for 4 centuries, and that virtually every acre in the state has been disturbed over time. And that vast amounts of the natural canopy were cut down for agriculture, for fuel, for construction. So it's an absolute imperative in my mind that we redevelop previously urbanized sites in ways that seek to heal the damages to the natural environment. Now, whether this is done as part of a watershed planning effort or not, I don't think it really matters, as long as it's done. But I wouldn't make it contingent on having a watershed plan in place. I would move forward on a site-by-site basis as fast as possible. And I would argue that it's equally an absolute imperative that we take the exact same approach to any urbanization of existing farmland or former farmlands, or to conversions of other open space uses, such as golf courses, which will become increasingly common, that may have reached the end of their useful life. We call this regenerative design. And I cannot imagine any intervention on any lands that doesn't follow these principles. Now, planning as a discipline has evolved enormously over the course of my lifetime. We are light years beyond where we were in the 1950s. The quantitative tools, the geospatial tools, the visualization tools, the very scientific basis for planning decisions have all evolved exponentially. And yet, most municipal planning is still done using 1950s tools and assumptions. I foresee an AI-driven planning, artificial intelligence-driven planning, replacing 90% of municipal planners in the coming years with advantages, Now, this is obviously not a view that's going to make me very popular with my colleagues, but it's what I believe nevertheless. So now we'll look at some slides.
3 minutes. 2 minutes.
Angela is gonna cut her presentation short.
Use the road.
Sorry.
Here we
You
go.
got it?
I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Figured it out. Okay, so let's recognize that centuries of human habitation have profoundly changed our landscapes. And again, whether this kind of work is done on a watershed basis, which I think is maybe a little ambitious, how about we start with doing it on a site-specific basis, which we're not doing now. And we have to recognize that our natural systems, as we heard this morning over and over again, are seriously underperforming. We live and work in distressed environments, whether urban, suburban, or rural. Regenerative design can help us identify the problems and find the solutions. And this should be an absolute requirement of any intervention on previously disturbed sites, which is not the case, right? If you look at our regulatory system, the zoning, everything else, it's all about containing damage. It's not about reversing already done damage. It's containing future damage. And if you happen to improve the performance, as I said earlier, of a site in any number of ways, you don't get rewarded for it. So we went through a period in the 90s when we were focusing on brownfields, right? Lots of programs for reclaiming brownfields. And then we continued to do that. But after 2000 or so, we started looking at gray fields, abandoned or underperforming shopping malls, office buildings, etc. And we continue to do that to this day. And with the collapse in the commercial office market, we're seeing it more and more and more. Now, this is a real case study from Burlington County, which I did, and it's an old project, at least 20 years old. A 50-acre regional mall on Route 130 in Willingboro, 100% paved, didn't have a single blade of grass growing on it. The mall, for various market-related reasons, went defunct. In the town, it was the biggest rateable in town. The town panicked. What can we do? What can we do? Somehow they were encouraged to use the redevelopment statute, which they did. They designated the property as a redevelopment site. They took control over it, and they put out an RFP for a developer. And somehow, by an incredible stroke of good fortune, they were able to lure a developer from New York City with, I think, no previous experience, who in turn hired various very progressive architects who redesigned the site. They completely demolished everything that was on there. They redesigned the site, and they considerably reduced the impervious surface. They turned it into a mixed-use project. They daylighted a stream and created various ponds and so forth. And it's been built. You can go see it. It's not a new urbanist project. It doesn't look, it doesn't, but it's a real example of how you can take a 50-acre site and undo a lot of the damage that had been done when it had originally been developed. Okay. Now, this type of an approach is now systematically being used all over the country in many instances, like in the Denver metro area, more than half of the regional malls have been turned into mixed-use neighborhoods, and the others are basically on the way. It's known in the literature as retrofitting the suburbs, and this is one of the first examples on Cape Cod, the strip mall that became a town center. This is an example from the Denver metro area, where, as you saw, that again, and these are new urbanist projects. One example that slightly different, not too far from here, the Robbinsville Town Center. This was a new town center that was created, and it's New Jersey's new urbanist community, developed according to a very precise plan. But of equal interest to our conversation is that the entire town center received a single freshwater wetlands permit. It wasn't a single property, there were many properties, but the entire thing was viewed comprehensively, received a single wetlands permit, received a single comprehensive stormwater management plan. The whole thing was adopted. And what was their stormwater management plan? The lake. That lake, which is a fantastic amenity for the entire town center, was planned as a functioning part of their stormwater management plan. I think this is unprecedented. It was an experimental thing. I don't know what happened. State government was thinking in creative ways, and somehow this got built. Extremely popular, very popular. I should probably stop here, right?
Well, I don't know how close you are to the end, but I have to get Angela.
I'll stop here.
Show the picture. Yeah.
I'll stop here. So, but you sort of get you get the message. It's possible to do these things. It's possible to do them. It's possible to do them at the municipal level. It's possible to do them at the state level. It's even possible to put in place mechanisms that will make these things happen as a result of private sector initiatives, not just do-gooder developers, but hard-nosed developers that actually do the calculations and figure out that they can make more money by doing the right thing, by fixing the sites. I mean, all you have to do is put in place a system of incentives, and then they know what to do. They'll run with it. So if my message regarding the viability of the larger scale planning efforts is skeptical, don't let that discourage you, because I think there's plenty of ways of tackling these issues that are actually lesser lift, and that will make a tremendous amount of difference. And with that, I'm going
Thank
to
you.
scurry back.
Thank you. Let's see if Angela's slide is here. Oh, there's biomimicry. Oh, I love this one.
Oh, that's right.
That's awesome. All right, you can't skip that one.
I forgot about that.
You don't have to identify which article of clothing you identify with. We're not going to ask you to confess what you wear. Here you are. Thank you.
Thank
What
you.
got this thing? You have to
Okay.
hold it or it's going to
Got it.
fly off the
Okay.
podium.
Well, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there for all those. And I'm glad that you kind of ended by saying that there are opportunities for these things. As a planner, I tend to be an eternal optimist, and I happen to believe in watershed planning. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the municipal approach to watershed planning and how towns can incorporate these policies and work with their neighboring towns and potentially use their county resources. So certainly towns can work with their local community groups like the Watershed Institute. Another great resource are the counties. because a lot of them will have already completed a lot of the planning efforts on behalf of their municipality. So they'll likely have a lot of data that your town might require to update different parts of your master plan or your zoning ordinances. And so I've given just sort of a couple examples of county planning resources that may be out there that your town can reach out to them and see what kind of information is available to you. Counties typically have a hazard mitigation plan that again typically has different chapters or sections for each town in their county. So your town should have a portion of that hazard mitigation plan already kind of out there with and adopted with your county plan. Your county may also have an open space plan or a circulation plan that will likely address regional efforts for protection and connectivity and access. And a county land use plan may lay out opportunities for planning for resilience throughout the county. And again, they would likely have the data that supports the planning, which would be a great resource for your town. Lastly, a county might have an economic development plan or development strategy, which would address the connection between thriving downtown areas and a healthy environment. So again, those goals would likely, for the county, would likely have a regional approach. So, so just, I guess, right off the bat, I would say, you know, if you're thinking about doing, you know, resiliency planning in your community, to reach out to your county, they may already have a lot of the data that you might require for that. So I'm going to take you just through a quick example from Somerset County. And when I was there, we developed a series of workshops that were based on a program that FEMA had run, which was looking particularly at the riverine communities in different sections of New Jersey. And so we sort of took that model that FEMA had done and tailored it to Somerset County. And we held a couple workshops with roughly half of our towns. There's 21 towns in Somerset County. About half of them participated in each of the workshops. And, you know, Somerset County sometimes can be an anomaly for some of these things. They tend to be fairly progressive. And, you know, this is meant to be a model for your county, for your community. So we really kind of set out for these workshops to be listening sessions. You know, I think generally we kind of knew where the problem areas were related to watershed planning, flood management, stormwater management. So we really meant for it to be a listening session where we wanted the towns to kind of really pinpoint the areas that were problem areas for them, and then using some more constructive ideas and talking to each other, the neighboring towns talking to each other, where might there be opportunities to resolve some of those problems. And again, this was really talking about resiliency and stormwater management. And again, look, somebody pointed out earlier on one of the maps that one of the towns in Somerset County is Manville, which has actually 3 confluences of water bodies coming together: the Millstone River, the Raritan River, and the Royce Brook. So that confluence creates very troubling problems for them when it floods. So one of the things we wanted the towns to think about was that there was no one silver bullet answer to how these solutions were going to come about. We were looking for multi-pronged solutions. So anytime we were, you know, asking folks to think out of the box about different solutions for stormwater management, we were trying to get them to think of things that might do double duty. So maybe restoring a stream bank in the short term, but that could potentially be a connection to a bike path or, you know, some sort of recreation area that could then lead people to the downtown, you know. So a stream bank restoration project would be that in the short term, but the long-term benefits of that, not just for flood management, but also for connecting people to other parts of the community. The county's role in this process, And the goals for the workshop were really meant to lead to the creation of what we were calling the Resilient Somerset County Plan. That would be a community-led and really would be crafted by the towns. And again, would hopefully break down any of those municipal barriers to doing more watershed-based planning. So in order to set the stage for this and to get the towns thinking about planning on a watershed scale, we broke them out into groups based on their sub-watershed area. And again, we were working with roughly half of our towns, so we had to kind of speak for some towns that weren't represented there. But we thought this was a really good way to get them thinking beyond their own municipal boundaries, to see the lines of the sub-watersheds, you know, drawn on the maps, and the rivers there, the streams, so they could start looking at where, you know, when they were pinpointing the problem areas, we could look at the whole sub-watershed and then the whole watershed to look at where there might be opportunity areas as well. Now, one sort of critique of this is that, well, that one shouldn't then stop at the county boundary, that it, you know, could go into the next county as well. So again, we were sort of using this as a pilot project, and our next step after that would then be to go to our neighboring counties and see if this type of program would work in their communities as well. So again, these are just pictures of the maps, and it's really hard to see here, but there are little red dots and little green dots on the map. The red dots were the problem areas and the green dots were the potential solution areas. And what was really great is we actually had some folks from other watershed groups that were there that pointed out in the western part of the county, there were actually some grasslands that needed restoration and could potentially provide the types of solutions that we needed in other parts of the county. So it was interesting to hear some of those opportunities that we might not have known. You know, this was a reason why we wanted to bring the municipalities together, is because they are the ones experiencing these flooding issues on the ground. They're very familiar with these problems. And so to know where the problem areas and the solution areas were from their perspective was really helpful for us. So we then sort of summarized the two workshops into a couple takeaways. I won't read through all of them, but ultimately, you know, we saw that the majority of the problem areas were in the southern part of the county, and the majority of the opportunity areas where we could do some restoration and some better stormwater management were in the northern parts of the county, the more upland areas. We talked about potentially having golf courses around the county being potential locations for enhanced stormwater management. We had one of the main goals that came out of this, and sort of what became like our motto for these workshops, was actually something the Montgomery mayor put out there, was that we should really be trying to plan so that we keep water where it lands. And I will always quote her on that because I thought that was really well said. We also talked about maintenance. And so again, those multi-pronged solutions, that it wasn't just going to be, you know, just sort of the short-term fixes, but that long-term maintenance over time, reinforcing culverts, bridges. And then ultimately there isn't one silver bullet answer to any of these. Since we were thinking of this as potentially being a long-term project and something that we would continue working with the towns on, we wanted them to kind of walk away with some questions that they should be asking themselves, and maybe you could be asking in your own communities, is that where do you foresee needing assistance? And again, this is the county taking this role on to say, do you need more outreach, education, technical assistance, funding? We wanted them to look at their planning documents and see how they align, if they actually build upon one another. And then looking at, have they actually done an assessment to see if the losses that they've had from flooding over the years, or other natural hazards, how has that been affecting them? How would they foresee that affecting them down the road if nothing changed? And then also to, again, with the alignment, does the town participate in plan endorsement through the Office of Planning Advocacy, as Donna talked about? Again, having that alignment and consistency across planning really is helpful as the towns go forward with their own planning. Just really quick. So we had a couple of partners in this. Again, as I said, the FEMA planning staff was very helpful in organizing the workshops and helping to facilitate. DEP presented at the workshops, so they were very involved. They were also very interested in the listening session part of it. They wanted to hear where they could be doing better. We relied heavily on our Office of GIS to do the mapping and then geocoding of the problem areas and solution areas. And our county commissioners were also very supportive and came out to support at the workshops as well. And that was very fast. I'm sorry. But thank you very much for hanging in there with us today.
Thank you, Laura. Before we entertain questions, and please do feel free to come up to the mic if you are interested in asking a question. I'm just going to run through the final slides here and then stop screen sharing. So as you know, you can find this and all the other programming from today in the hub. It's all been recorded, and we hope that you stay in touch with us at the Watershed and come see us at our preserve. Let me stop the screen share now. Okay, great. Sorry. Oh. We're good? Okay. So we have one question that came in from the virtual world, but is anyone in the room going to start us off with a question before I address that one? Not yet? Okay. So the question here is, do counties or county planning offices provide support and/or technical assistance to municipalities in reviewing their ordinances, particularly around land use and development? That's a great question. Would anyone like to address that?
I'll take that. It's very county specific. There are many counties that do not have the resources to support their municipalities in that way. Somerset County is one that has great resources, that have a lot of technical assistance. I call them my poster child for good land use planning. But not every county is the same. So from what I've seen, it runs the gamut from really, really good to counties that frankly have no county planning staff and they rely on consultants. So it really is very county specific.
Tom, you want to address that question as well?
We saw an interesting statistic earlier this morning when we saw how many billions of dollars are being spent on roads and bridges, et cetera, going through. The point you need to know is we spend $1 million a mile on roads. What do we spend on planning? 30 years ago, when I was in the state planning office, we actually reviewed master plans for consistency with the state plan. And where they were consistent, those towns used those consistency reviews in the courts and won. It saved them millions of dollars, not only in taxes, in services, but also in court fees going through that. Planning works. Planning is less expensive. And we need to encourage folks to think about that. Senator Smith threw down the gauntlet today. We should all take it up. If you really believe in all of this, we need to get our legislature to understand they need to fund planning.
That's very true. Unfortunately, many municipalities are running their municipalities on a shoestring budget. And if I'm a mayor and I have $5, am I going to spend it to pay for police, or am I going to spend it to pay for something that's 20 years down the road? When you think about water, you turn the water on and water comes out. So nobody really focuses on that. And that's what makes it a difficult decision. I think municipalities want to do the right thing, but many of them don't have the resources to do so.
I was talking about the county and state level.
I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier. AI is going to change all of this dramatically, dramatically.
But it
For the
takes,
better.
but it takes humans to make decisions. AI will not take the official vote, will not be elected. We will not elect AI.
But I also want to recognize that I met Donna at a conference, and I was at the time a councilwoman in Rocky Hill, my hometown. And she came up to me afterward because I asked a question and asked how we could get help with a planning issue. And so, you know, we have here folks with experience at multiple scales. And it can be daunting, you know, where to go and when to ask for help. But one of the points of putting this panel together for me was to promote this idea that we have dexterity at different scales and that we work and volunteer and know our localities. And then we go out, you know, beyond our neighborhoods and municipalities and try to take that at a higher scale. And I think the reverse is true. I mean, Donna or county planners or Carlos, who's been all over the state and worked with different governmental entities, you know, they also know how to work with the neighborhood group or someone who's objecting to a development that's harmful to the environment. So it's the dexterity that we all need, I think, to jump scale to improve our watersheds. I'm going to ask one more time if anyone in the room has a concluding question. Everyone's tired, I'm sure. So with that, I want to thank this panel and thank them for not only their participation, but a couple of the meetings that we had leading up to this were really inspiring and for me, and I learned a lot. So I hope to bring that into my work and stay in touch. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful weekend.